Now, you may not be an expert on water. You may not know much about water except that you turn on the faucet and you hope something comes out. And that's where I was about 10 years ago, before my first town hall on water. So before you get into these discussions, we want you to have at least a little bit of information from someone who is an expert on water, and that would not be me. So we have found someone for you who's going to give you just a little bit of an overview about Arizona water issues that hopefully will inform you on the discussions that you have. She has an incredible resume, which I won't read all of, but we will be sure is posted on our website, because I know that she would love to be a resource for you afterwards if you want to use her as a resource. So today I'll give her her very short title and introduce Kelly Mott Lacroix, who's the Senior Research Analyst for the Water Resources Research Center down in Tucson. Please welcome Kelly.
Hi, you guys. It's really a great pleasure and honor to be able to speak to you here in this room and everyone remotely today. A couple of years ago, I was up in Cottonwood roaming what was literally acres of antiques, and I came across this little gem. It's an Arizona Highways magazine from 1961, and it's all about water. And one of my favorite things about this magazine is a series of poems, because when we work in water, a lot of times we think about hydrology and engineering and very hard stuff, not about poetry. And there's a poem in here about Roosevelt Dam. It's commemorating the 50th anniversary of the creation of that dam. And I'm going to read just a couple of lines to you because I think it really sets up our whole conversation today and thinking about water. The dam. I am the dam. I was built of rock and stone and iron and cement, and of men's faith and courage and dreams and hopes and visions. I was built to tame an unruly river. I'm not the biggest dam ever built, or the costliest, or perhaps not the most graceful, but I am the oldest. Other dams have been built on the river below me, and now we all work together to store water, make power, and offer all forms of recreation to city dwellers and the folks who live in this land that is thirsty no longer. A land that is thirsty no longer. That is where we live in Arizona. And in fact, the generations of Arizonans before us thought about and worked long and hard to ensure that our land was thirsty no longer. So much so that most of us don't even have to think about it. When was the last time you thought about where your water comes from? Or for that matter, where it goes? Well, it is true that water can neither be created nor destroyed. It just cycles through falling from the sky, pooling on the land, evaporating again, and then falling. It can be moved, and it can be stored. Indeed, it is the act of moving and storing our water, which began with the building of Roosevelt Dam in 1911, that enables us to be here today and has made the land thirsty no longer. But where does your water come from today? If you're sitting with me here in the room or in another place here in Maricopa County, your water comes from the Gila, the Salt, the Verde rivers, from 1,000-year-old groundwater beneath your feet, and even from Colorado River water, which is pumped uphill hundreds of miles to reach your tap with those little droplets that come out from many different places. If you're in Yuma, your water comes directly from the Colorado River, either diverted or pumped from shallow aquifers. If you're up in Flagstaff, you get your water from groundwater or from nearby Lake Mary. Down in Tucson, we get most of our water from the Colorado River as well, although by this point, it's traveled over 300 miles to reach us. That water goes back down into the ground and then is melded with groundwater and pumped again. But many areas outside of Tucson, the city of Tucson, and outside of our metropolitan areas rely just on groundwater. In each place, our water comes from rivers, also known as surface water, and groundwater. The mix of each varies. Some places depend almost completely on groundwater, others depend almost completely on surface water. The state as a whole, we use about 57% of our water is surface water, about 40% is groundwater, and a small but very important 3% is reclaimed water, or water that was once surface water or groundwater, has been used, treated, and reused again, usually for landscaping, industrial, agricultural uses. Although we talk about different sources of water, groundwater and surface water, fundamentally they are all one and the same, all part of that cycle. Much of our groundwater discharges into streams eventually, or drops flowing in streams seep back into the groundwater. It is all connected. The land is thirsty no longer, but we are thirsty. We use about 7 million acre-feet of water a year in Arizona. That's 2.3 trillion gallons a year. Another way to think about it is take Maricopa County and cover the entirety of Maricopa County with a foot deep of water. That's how much water we use in the state every single year. If you think about it on a more personal level, depending on where you live in the state, you use 60 gallons per day or to 300 gallons per day. If you take a water bottle, one of those water jugs, and you lay it down and you lay them end to end to end, if you use 60 gallons per day, that will stretch 2 miles. If you use 300 gallons per day, your water bottles would stretch over 10 miles, your personal water use. Most of the 7 million acre-feet that we use, however, does not go to cities. 70% of the water used in the state of Arizona goes to agriculture, 25% of it to our cities, and the remaining 5% to industry, like mining and power generation. And while each of these uses takes from the ground or the surface water, they also each put water back in, but it's generally of a lower quality. It is this return flow, which is what we call it for agriculture, or reclaimed water, which is what we generally call it for cities and industry, that present a tremendous opportunity for getting the most out of every drop. And indeed, we have gotten the most out of every drop over the past 50 years. 9 years after this poem was written, in 1970, Arizona used 7.8 million acre-feet of water per year, and we had a population of 1.8 million people. Recall that today we use 7 million acre-feet, less than in 1970, yet we have a population of over 6.5 million people, and we grow more agriculture today than we did back in the 1970s. In particular, in Yuma, there's been a 6-fold increase in vegetables over that period of time. We have, over our parents, and in some of your cases, grandparents' generations, become more efficient. We do more with less. But what will the future look like? Can we become even more water-wise? Although great progress has been made, we should remember that realizing the, quote, men's faith and courage and dreams and hopes and visions, man, that's a lot of ands, isn't it? Through maximizing our water, this can have consequences too. The poem speaks of taming our rivers. While a tamed river offers opportunities for storage and recreation on the lake, it also fundamentally changes an environment. Plants and animals supported by free-flowing rivers often cannot survive this change. But dams are not the only way that we impact our natural environment and the water within it. On a local scale, it's impacted by the many wells that we drill into the aquifers. On a regional to global scale, it's impacted by changes in our climate. Hotter days mean more evaporation, more intense rainstorms mean more flooding, and continued drought just means less water for everyone. Thinking about climate change, thirsty lands, trillions of gallons, miles of canals, and dams that dwarf even the tallest skyscraper here in Phoenix can be very intimidating. But contemplating your role in water and making a change around water does not have to be. In my work at the Water Resources Research Center at the University of Arizona, I had the privilege last year to interview people throughout the state about their thoughts and opinions on water, and in particular, their relationship with water and the environment. I heard many fascinating things during those interviews, but one that stuck with me in particular came from a member of one of Arizona's tribes. This person told me, water is a part of you, a life form. When we talk about water, you have to put the blood in it. Water is not just all around you in your life. It is a part of you. Each of you are about 60% water. So I have 2 challenges for you. One will take a week, starting this afternoon, and the other, I hope, will take you a lifetime. In both, the goal is simple. I want each and every one of you to think about water. In the first, I challenge you to spend this afternoon coming up with as many great thoughts you can to answer these questions, and then wake up tomorrow morning and take every action you make and think about how water made it possible and how much water it uses. Wake up in the morning and turn on your light, if you're not sleeping in, of course. Chances are that electricity was made using water to either mine the coal or cool the power plant towers, put on a t-shirt and jeans, and think of the water, and for that matter, the farmer it took to grow that cotton. Walk to your kitchen and make some coffee, which is particularly important if you've slept in, right? And think about the water it took to grow those beans, to roast those beans, that happened long before you ever put your cup of water into that machine. Turn on the tap to wash your coffee cup, and think about where that water came from and how fortunate you are that you don't have to walk for miles in order to have water to wash your coffee cup or your hair. In everything we do all day long, water plays some type of role. Just being aware of that role and talking about with other people who are here today with you, and perhaps most importantly, those who are not, creates awareness. Think of the impact if each of us shifted our personal water use from 10 miles of 1-gallon jugs to 2. In other words, the difference between 300 gallons per person per day to 60 gallons per person per day. My second challenge to you is to take a look at what you're most interested in as a career, whether it be a hydrologist, a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, and incorporate a water consciousness into it. Some careers, like mine, or that of an engineer who works to build more efficient mechanisms of transporting water, have an obvious and direct connection to water. But you don't have to become a hydrologist, an engineer, or a water lawyer to impact Arizona's ability to keep our water glass full. What about if you're interested in becoming an architect? Could you design buildings that are more water efficient or that capture and keep more water use on site so that you can water your plants with that water from the roof instead of pumping groundwater? What if you want to be an artist? Incorporate water and how you personally relate to it into your work. You'll further spread knowledge about its importance. Do you want to be a teacher, perhaps? Make sure your students read fiction that shows the impacts of droughts, or do science experiments on evaporation. Water can even be important to the aspiring philosopher. What about contemplating the question, what is so special about our relationship with these 2 molecules of hydrogen and 1 of oxygen? What if you want to be a businessman or woman? What new business could you create that capitalizes on our need for and concern about water efficiency? If you come from a farming family, what can you invent or implement that would allow you to grow more with less? Or perhaps even more importantly, what could you do to explain that vital role of water to the people who eat or wear your crops? If each of you listening today finds some way to incorporate water, a water consciousness rather, into your chosen career, you, much like that dam built in 1911, will ensure that this land continues to be thirsty no more and remains an amazing place to live, work, and play for your generation, my generation, and the generations to come. Thank you.